Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into one of the most significant regulatory approvals of the year. I mean, this is a decision that really just resets the entire landscape for a major heart disease market.
It really does. We're talking about the FDA approval for MYQORZO, which is the trade name for aficamten. It's from Cytokinetics, ticker CYTK.
And this is way more than just another approval. For Cytokinetics, this is a defining moment. It pretty much positions them overnight as a commercial leader in this very targeted muscle biology space.
It does. And the indication here is for adults with symptomatic obstructive hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or OHCM. It's a completely new way to manage a really debilitating condition.
And the timing. Right before the holidays. It dropped on December 19th, 2025. And you said this isn't just another drug for them. This is CYTK's first FDA-approved medicine.
Yeah, think about that. They've gone from a pure R&D company to a commercial entity, basically with the flip of a switch.
So what was the initial market reaction? I mean, you'd expect some excitement.
Oh, absolutely. The reaction tells you everything. We saw an immediate after-hours surge. I think it was up to 7% in the shares before it pared back a little.
Okay.
But what's really telling is the retail sentiment. The volume on this news was just through the roof. It was labeled extremely high, and the sentiment was extremely bullish. The market gets that this validates a whole new mechanism in a space that's been, really underserved for a long time.
And we have a timeline for the rollout.
We do. They're expecting it to be available in the U.S. in the second half of January 2026. And it's launching with 4 different dosage tablets, which is actually pretty important.
Right. The 5, 10, 15, and 20 milligram tablets. That flexibility matters, especially with the kind of monitoring we're going to talk about later.
Exactly. But first, I think we have to understand the disease itself to really appreciate how big of a breakthrough this is.
Yeah, let's do that. Because hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, HCM, is where this gets really interesting. It's an inherited disorder, and it's characterized by an abnormally thick heart muscle.
That's it. Specifically, the left ventricular wall. And it's actually the most common inherited cardiovascular disorder that's caused by a single gene.
So how many people are we talking about?
Well, there are over 300,000 diagnosed patients in the U.S. right now. But here's the kicker. There's a massive diagnosis gap. The estimates suggest there are another 400,000 to maybe 800,000 additional patients out there who are completely undiagnosed.
Wow. So the true market could be, double what we're currently treating?
Potentially, yeah. And for the obstructive form, OHCM, the one this drug is approved for, the pathology is severe. That thickening of the muscle creates a literal physical blockage. It stops blood from flowing out of the left ventricle properly.
And that blockage leads to some awful symptoms. Shortness of breath, fatigue, chest pain, even fainting.
Right. And the root problem, down at the molecular level is something called hypercontractility. Your heart muscle is just contracting way too strongly.
Too many of these little actin-myosin cross bridges, these connections.
Exactly. And older treatments, things like beta blockers, they just slow the heart down. They treat the symptoms, but they don't fix that underlying mechanical problem.
Which brings us to MYQRZO's mechanism. This is the big innovation, right? This new class of cardiac myosin inhibitors. So how does it fix that hypercontractility?
So it's an allosteric and reversible inhibitor of cardiac myosin. You can think of myosin as the tiny little motor protein that's responsible for muscle contraction.
Okay, the engine.
It's the engine. And this drug was specifically engineered to bind to that motor and essentially, dial down the force. It stops the engine from going into overdrive. And by doing that, it physically relieves the obstruction in the left ventricular outflow tract, the LVOT. It lets the heart breathe, so to speak.
So let's talk about the data that got it approved. The pivotal phase 3 CQY HCM trial, the results were pretty robust.
They were. They focused on exercise capacity, which is really the gold standard here. They measured something called peak oxygen uptake, or PVO2.
What exactly is PVO2?
It's the maximum amount of oxygen your body can use during intense exercise. It's probably the best objective measure we have for a patient's quality of life and, their physical limits.
So what did the data actually show?
Over 24 weeks, the group on the drug showed a really significant improvement. Their PVO2 went up by 1.8 milliliters per kilogram per minute. The placebo group, basically zero change.
Okay, so 1.8. To a layperson, that sounds like a tiny number. What does that actually mean for a patient?
I know it sounds small, but clinically, it's huge. It's the difference between struggling to walk across a room and being able to navigate your daily life with a real, tangible improvement in function and fatigue.
And it wasn't just about maximum effort, right? I saw other studies, like MYQORZO HCM, showed it was better than the old standard of care, metoprolol.
That's right. It wasn't just about maximal exercise. It also improved submaximal performance, the kind of effort you use for daily chores. And it even improved how quickly patients recovered after exercise. It's a massive leap in quality of life.
So that's the short term. But this is a chronic, progressive disease. The big question is, does the drug just treat symptoms, or can it actually reverse some of the physical damage, the cardiac remodeling?
That's the million-dollar question. And the 48-week data from the FOREST-HCM study give us a really encouraging answer. They saw these rapid, sustained reductions in the LVOT gradient. We're talking drops of 40 and 53 millimilli drop.
A 53 millimilli drop that's a dramatic change in blood flow.
It's a huge hemodynamic shift.
Yeah.
But even more important were the structural changes. The data really suggests favorable cardiac remodeling. They saw measurable reductions in the thickness of the left ventricular wall.
How much of a reduction?
About 1.2 millimeters, which, again, might sound tiny, but a 1.2 millimeter physical reduction in wall thickness suggests the drug isn't just managing the problem in the moment, it's potentially leading to a long-term reversal of the disease itself.
And that translated to how patients felt?
Oh, absolutely. 82% of the participants improved by at least one NYHA functional class, which is a formal way of saying their symptoms got dramatically better.
Okay, so the clinical picture is phenomenal. Let's pivot to the investor context, because this is where we have to talk about the friction. There are some critical safety constraints in the prescribing info that are going to impact the rollout.
This is the fine print everyone is scrutinizing. The FDA included a mandatory boxed warning.
A black box, that's always serious.
Always. It's for the risk of heart failure caused by systolic dysfunction. And it makes sense, right? The drug's entire job is to reduce contractility. If you reduce it too much, you reduce the left ventricular ejection fraction, or LVEF.
Which is the percentage of blood leaving the heart with each beat. If that drops, the heart failure risk goes way up. So what's the monitoring look like?
It is stringent. It is mandatory. You have to get an echocardiogram, an echo, before you even start the treatment, and then repeatedly during treatment. You can't even start if a patient's LVEF is below 55%.
And what happens if it drops during treatment?
If LVEF drops below 50%, you have to decrease the dose immediately. If it drops below 40%, you stop the drug completely. That's the hard stop. That signals you're headed for symptomatic heart failure.
And all of this monitoring requires a pretty restrictive commercial setup, the REMIS program.
The risk evaluation and mitigation strategy, yeah. And this is a major commercial headwind. It creates all these layers of administrative friction. Doctors have to get certified. Patients have to enroll and promise to comply with all the monitoring.
And only certified pharmacies can even handle the drug.
Right. It creates a ton of workflow complexity. Your cardiologist suddenly has to be an administrator managing the prescription and the patient's compliance with the REMIS program.
And you could see how a busy doctor might just stick with the older, less effective beta blockers because it's just easier.
It's a real risk. The initial ramp will almost certainly be slower because of these operational challenges.
And that's not even getting into the drug interaction profile, which adds another layer of complexity.
Yes. It's metabolized by a bunch of common enzymes like CYP2C9. You don't need to know the names, but the consequence is what matters. It interacts with a huge range of common medications.
Like what?
Well, common antifungals like fluconazole or some antidepressants. Taking those can drastically increase the concentration of aficamten in the blood, which spikes that heart failure risk we just talked about.
So a patient's whole medication list has to be carefully managed.
Exactly. And on the flip side, something like the antibiotic rifampin can make the drug less effective, so you just can't take them together at all.
Okay, so that complexity really explains why that initial stock surge was a bit tempered. The market sees the hurdles. But let's look bigger picture, globally and into the pipeline, because this story is bigger than just the US OHCM market.
For sure. The global rollout is moving fast. It was approved in China just days before the FDA. And the European Medicines Agency, the EMA, has already given a positive opinion. A final decision there is expected in Q1 2026.
But the real game changer, the transformative potential, is in expanding beyond the obstructive form of the disease.
Absolutely. The biggest future growth driver is the non-obstructive HCM population NHCM. And there's already a phase 3 trial, CQY HCM, underway for that indication.
And we already have some pretty encouraging long-term data for that NHCM group, don't we?
We do, from the FOREST-HCM study. After 96 weeks, those non-obstructive patients showed substantial and sustained improvement in their symptoms. 79% improved by at least one NYHA class.
And what about the safety? Was the LVEF drop still a big concern?
The safety profile actually looked even more favorable than in the obstructive group. The LVEF reductions were manageable and reversible. And that long-term safety data, it significantly de-risks that big phase 3 NHCM trial.
And beyond that, Cytokinetics has other drugs in the pipeline for heart failure, right? They're trying to own this whole muscle biology space in cardiology.
That's clearly the goal. They're not just a one-trick pony.
Okay, time now for our segment. This is not financial advice. We're looking for that outrageous but plausible trade idea based on everything we've just talked about.
Definitely not financial advice. So the thesis starts by acknowledging what the market is focused on right now. The street is fixated on the restrictive REMS program, the boxed warning, all the headwinds for the obstructive indication.
Right, so conservative sales estimates, a slow launch, that's all baked into the current stock price.
It's all baked in. So the plausible but maybe outrageous pitch is this. You initiate a long position in CYTK, and you're betting almost exclusively on the success of that phase 3 CQY HCM trial. The one for non-obstructive HCM.
Whoa, wait, that's a huge risk.
Yep.
You're saying ignore the guaranteed revenue from the current approval and bet everything on a trial result that's maybe a year or more away. What happens if that trial fails?
It is a substantial risk, no question. But the reward is potentially transformative. Let's just do the math. Roughly half of all HCM patients have the non-obstructive form. If you get an approval for NHCM, you effectively double the total addressable market overnight.
You double the entire market.
You double it. The stock is currently priced for a slow, friction-filled launch into half the market. A positive result in that NHCM trial would be a massive regulatory catalyst that would completely overshadow any of the near-term REMS friction.
So the trade isn't about the next few quarters of sales?
No. The trade is about claiming the entire massive HCM patient population with a positive data readout. That's the path to a multi-bagger return. It's a high-stakes play, but it's a plausible one.
That is a compelling, very forward-looking trade. Okay, so to recap this deep dive, Cytokinetics got its monumental FDA approval for MYQORZO, really affirming the power of this new cardiac myosin inhibitor class for treating obstructive hypertrophic cardiomyopathy.
And the clinical data was profound. You saw those clinically meaningful improvements in exercise capacity, that PVO2 lift, and then long-term evidence of favorable cardiac remodeling. All of this despite the necessary box warning and the complexity of the REMS program.
And understanding those clinical details, the LVEF numbers, the LVOT gradient, is just essential for looking at future growth, especially when you think about the sheer scale of that non-obstructive market they're going after.
Right. And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on. What happens when you combine this highly effective new class of drugs with the rapid emergence of artificial intelligence? AI is already being developed to diagnose HCM from basic EKGs and echoes.
So you're saying AI could find all those undiagnosed patients?
What if AI actually uncovers that hidden pool of 400,000 to 800,000 undiagnosed patients and does it quickly? If mass screening suddenly becomes feasible, how dramatically does that expand the total available market for MYQORZO and this entire class of drugs? It's a technological catalyst that could completely redefine this market for the next decade.